Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me tonight for the learning of the Haggadah. It's a big zchut to have all of you here with me. Be'ezrat Hashem, tonight we're going to be studying the Haggadah Shel Pesach, the Haggadah that we all are familiar with, Baruch Hashem, sit down to the Seder. And I just wanted to go over some points. As you know, the Haggadah is an entire world, and there's no possible way that we'll be able to even scratch the tip of the iceberg in the short amount of time that we have. But Bezat Hashem, we're going to do our best to go through a bunch of different points about the Haggadah. Hopefully, it'll enhance our Seder, God willing, this year and for years to come. Bezat Hashem, we'd like to dedicate the learning tonight for the complete and speedy recovery of Eliyahu ben Sarah, Amir Chaim ben Farouk, Menachem ben Khurshid, and Kol Cholei Yisrael, anybody who needs a refuah shlema, Hashem should send it to them very quickly, very soon. Be'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach. Okay, so the first couple of points that I want to bring out about the Seder, before we actually talk about Michal Badina also, Meshav refuah shlema as well. If we have any other names, feel free to text them to me before we start. May Hashem send them all a refuah shlema. Okay. So the first thing that I wanted to just share with you, Be'ezrat Hashem, the most important thing is how you come to the Seder. The idea of the Seder is that you want to come in the right frame of mind. Rabbi Akiva Eger, the great scholar from the 1800s, writes that a person should be thankful when he comes to the Seder that Hashem has given him the special zechut, the special merit, to live to see another Seder. And he's going to be able to fulfill many mitzvot the night of the Seder. First of all, the mitzvah of Kiddush that he's going to say over wine. And in this year, actually, it's going to be Havdalah as well. It's the mitzvah of separating between Shabbat and Yom Tov, that it's two different levels of holiness. Also the mitzvah of eating matzah, the mitzvah of eating maror, the bitter herbs, the mitzvah of having 4 cups of wine, the mitzvah of Hallel, of praising Hashem, which is the special mitzvah to do the night of Pesach, for all the miracles that he did for Am Yisrael, and also the very special mitzvah of telling over the story of the Exodus from Egypt, which is one of the 613 mitzvot that Hashem has given us to do the night of the original Exodus from Egypt, Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim. So these are all very special mitzvot that we get to do once a year, and we're engulfed in holiness. It's really a very special thing. Therefore, Rabotai, we have to come with the right frame of mind, being very thankful. Matter of fact, that's really what the blessing of Shechianu is all about. At Kiddush, right at the end, as you know, we have the blessing of Shechianu, which is thanking Hashem that He has given us life, the ability to go ahead and to live to see another Seder, which is an opportunity to do all of these very special mitzvot. We only get to do it once a year, so a person should make every effort to fulfill these mitzvot properly, to go through all the halachot about how to do them, and to do them in the best possible way. Now, remember, the job the night of the Seder on parents, on grandparents, is to give over the message of emunah. Emunah means faith in Hashem, of understanding that Hashem is in charge of everything and that en od milvado, there is nothing else in this world besides for Hashem. Just to give the simple example, like a refrigerator is plugged into the outlet or any kind of appliance, if you keep it plugged in, it's able to have its source of power, its source of energy that allows it to work. But if you unplug it, then automatically it doesn't have the ability to work anymore. This world as well is plugged into a source of power and energy, and that is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He. And if not for that energy that Hashem gives into the world every minute, every moment, it would cease to exist. There's nothing else really in this world besides for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So our job is to remember that was the night of the Seder, the night originally in Mitzrayim, and all the months where we saw the plagues happening, that Hashem revealed to the world that that's really how it works. The way that we see it today, everything is hidden. We don't see that Hashem has full domain and authority over the world. Everything seems to be going in what they call nature. In a normal, or what they call Mother Nature. But the night of, or the entire duration of the 10 plagues, we saw that Hashem has complete dominion over all forces of nature. And in a second, if Hashem wants it to be dark for a few days, It's going to be dark and nobody's able to move. If Hashem wants there to be blood in a river, there's going to be blood in the river and the fish will all die. Whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants, he has total control over all the, so to say, laws of nature, which he is the one who put them in motion in the first place, set them in motion, but they're not in motion. They're only going because he allows them to go. And if he wants them to stop for even just a second, then just like that, it's all over. So this is the night of the, what does the word seder mean? Let's talk about the word seder. Seder means order. There is an order to the world. There is an order to everything that happens. Although it seems like things don't have an order and everything is going wild, everything is going crazy, but the idea of the seder is that there is a seder to the world, an order. There is a divine orchestration over every single thing that takes place in the world. That's the idea of the night of the seder. That's our job as parents and as grandparents, to make the children realize that exact message, that nothing is coincidental, nothing is by happenstance, but rather everything is a seder. There's an order, there's a divine orchestration, there's divine supervision for everything. Nothing is by chance or by accident. From the slavery of Egypt to the redemption from Egypt, everything was there for a reason, everything was there for a purpose. We might not necessarily know the reason, we might not understand the reason, but it's there under divine orchestration and supervision. So it's important to be aware of that. That's our job, the night of the Siddur, to make sure that we give over that message of pure faith, belief in the fact that Hashem is in charge of everything, everything is under his control, and that nothing exists without being plugged into that source of life, of source of everything. So let's now, B'ezras Hashem, take the opportunity to talk about the Haggadah itself, what it exactly says. Before we go into it, I just want to give credit to a few great books that I would highly recommend to anybody. This year, every year I try to get another couple of books on the Haggadah. I don't have a lot of them, but just to show you, this is a beautiful Haggadah by Rabbi Moshe Bamberger. Great Jewish Haggadah, beautiful. If you ever want to take a look at that, very lovely. Fantastic book to get in English. Anybody could read it. I also used, of course, Chacham Ovadiah's Haggadah, Chacham Ovadiah Yosef Alav Shalom, and others as well, the Talalei Orot. So you got to give credit where credit is due. Baruch Hashem, fantastic material. I wish I had time to go through all of them, but unfortunately, that's not an option for me. But we're going to go through that. I just want to remind everybody, remember, the night of the Seder, who is the star of the Seder? Who is the superstar of the Seder? The kids. We do everything and anything to make sure the kids stay awake and they participate. We do all kinds of things to change, to deviate from the normal way of doing things. We do things randomly. For example, you'll see in the Haggadah, okay, now you take the Seder plate off the table, or you lift it up, or you cover it, or you do this, you do that. Any kind of deviation that you see is for one purpose and one purpose only: keep the kids awake, keep the kids involved, keep them asking, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? If it means that you have to be a little bit strange, like, so to say, do things a little bit out of the ordinary, well, that's the point, that you do something a little bit weird to get them to ask, well, why are you doing that? You don't usually do that. Don't you usually say Hamotzi right away? Why are we saying Kiddushin and we have this long thing going on in between? What's the deal with that? Oh, that's because all of this is to keep them involved. Again, why? Because our entire purpose the night of the Seder is to make sure that we instill this lesson in our children, that there is a Seder to the world, and to teach them all about the Yetziat Mitzrayim and to keep them involved, the Exodus from Egypt. This is all part of the Seder, to get them involved as possible. Now, this means that a lot of preparation is needed. A person must come to the Seder prepared with things, first of all, to understand what to do, how to do it, which, that's also it's a separate class in and of itself, how to go through it, which is important as well. But you need to come prepared. You need to have midrashim, different ideas, different stories to tell over about the Exodus from Egypt. You have to come on your game, and that way you'll be able to keep them awake, keep them involved, keep them engaged, and that way you'll be fulfilling the mitzvah in the best possible way. But now let's take a look at the Haggadah itself. Let's focus on some critical moments of the Haggadah. So we all know that there are the four questions that are asked, and famously, we can go through them quickly. Why is it, I'm going to do it in the Sephardic style, why is it that on the one hand we show that we dip 2 times on this night. We don't dip usually in the other nights. Let me explain it a little bit better. Usually speaking, when we eat a meal, there's not really anything that we have to dip our food into, but this night we have 2 dippings. The first one is the dipping of the celery, which is the karpas, in the salt water, and then we have the dipping of the maror, the bitter herbs, which we use usually romaine lettuce. Some people use horseradish. We dip it in the charoset, which is the cement-like kind of pasty type of item that we have, which is made of dates and nuts and honey, and or wine they put in. It's very nice and sweet. Why do we dip 2 times? That's question number one. So again, you see the child is asking, why is there a deviation from this night than all other nights? What's the difference? Also, usually we could have matzah if we want. We could have bread if we want. This night it's only matzah. Why is it that we also eat maror to have this memory of what's the idea? They have these bitter herbs. What's the purpose of that? Usually we don't eat that. And last but not least, why is it that we are all reclining to the left? As you know, the mitzvah of eating matzah, the mitzvah of korech, the sandwich, which is the matzah and the bitter herb sandwich, the mitzvah of all 4 cups of wine is to be done while reclining to the left. So it's incredibly important that you do that in order to fulfill the mitzvah properly. Reclining to the left, by the way, is to be done in a convenient, comfortable way. You're not supposed to be like a contortionist, mid-air like this, but rather you can take the chair, you could take the side of the chair, you could take a table just like this, nice and comfortable, leaning like that. Make sure that you're not leaning on somebody else, and making him uncomfortable. But the mitzvah is to be done while reclining. The reason for this, I remember hearing from my Rebbe, Rav Belsky alav shalom zecher tzedek livracha, is because back in the day, what they used to do is they used to serve people food on couches. So you had your own personal couch and a personal table that was brought to you just for you, and you would recline. And if you look in old historical pictures of kings and queens from the Roman era, you will find that this is how they used to eat. So we're trying to mimic royalty. So for the purposes of matzah, for the purposes of the korech, the sandwich of matzah and bitter herbs, for the purposes of the drinking of the wine, we all recline to the left. And that's a huge mitzvah. That shows that we're regal, we are free, and we're able to show that we are Hashem's chosen nation. We're royalty, the night of the Seder. So therefore, we have these 4 questions that the son is going to ask, or whoever it is. All the kids ask this question at the Seder. Some just sing it together. However you do it is beautiful. Now, the Barbanel, Don Yosef Barbanel, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, points out over here that these questions are actually questions that the child is asking, which are pointing to contradictions. They're contradictory implications by all the things that we're doing. So, for example, on the one hand, we're showing that we're slaves. Why are we showing that we're slaves? Because why do we dip 2 times? We dip the celery in the salt water. Salt water represents the salty tears of Bnei Yisrael, of the Jewish people. And then we dip the bitter herbs in the charoset, which is that thick paste, in order to remember the cement that the Jewish people had to use in order to build whatever cities the Egyptians wanted them to build. So that's a commemoration of slavery. So that's a very slave-like thing to talk about. It's all about the slavery. Then on the other hand, we're eating matzah to remember the fact that we left Egypt in a hurry and we became free. That's a sign of freedom. So it's 2 different actions that are contradicting each other. So what are we trying to show tonight? We were slaves or that we were free? And question number 3. We eat maror to remember the bitter slavery. The maror is the bitter herbs. So the romaine lettuce is, so to say, bitter, or the horseradish is even harder to eat. So you have all this to remember the slavery. Okay. Meanwhile, we're all leaning to the left, like we just said, to be like kings, like royalty. We're reclining to the left to be like royalty. So what's going on? Are we slaves or are we free? How do we look at this? So says the Abarbanel, that's why the following paragraph that says, Avadim Hayinu, the Paro b'Mitzrayim, we were slaves to Paro in Egypt. The idea is that on this very night, thousands of years ago, the answer is we were both. We started off the night as slaves in Egypt, but by the time the night was over, we were already out of Egypt and we were freed. We were free people. So in other words, the answer is both. The reason that we're doing these contradictory things is because on this very night, thousands of years ago, we had both elements. We were both slaves. We started off as slaves. And then, by the time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu saved us, we were freed. By the end of the night, we were free people. So since this night was different, it was filled with contradictions, so too we do contradictory things. But the truth is, there is no contradiction. It's just one part of the night was we were still slaves. By the end, we were free people. So that's really an incredible thing to understand. Okay, sorry, somebody here is texting me. Mechila, I can't really read it. Okay, so I can't get into that right now. I apologize. How do I get out of this? Okay, sorry about that. Okay, thank you. So we continue. The next part of the Haggadah, after the 4 questions, when we start to answer the question, we say, okay, we were slaves and we had all these slavery things, but then HaKadosh Baruch Hu saved us from Egypt. So we started off as slaves and then we became free people, which is an amazing thing. So then the Haggadah informs us of a halacha. Halacha is a Jewish law. The Haggadah informs us that this night, the night of the Exodus of Egypt, Hashem gave us a mitzvah. One of the 613 mitzvot that we have is to tell over the story of the Exodus of Egypt to our children. And it says in the Mishnah, if you don't have children, then you tell it over to whoever else is there. If nobody else is there, you even tell it over to yourself. It's an amazing thing. But you have a mitzvah to speak about how Hashem took us out from Egypt. Now, the classic example, the classic reaction by most people is that, why should we do that? We know everything already. We know the story already, right? That's what the kids always say. Why do we have to learn about this again? We learned this last year. Why do we have to? We know everything already. So the Haggadah tells us of 5 of the greatest chachamim, the greatest sages who ever lived, that they were sitting in Bnei Brak, and they were going ahead, and they were recounting the story of the Exodus from Egypt all night long until their students approached them in the morning and said, our dear rabbis, the time for the reciting of the Shema has arrived. It's time to say the Shema. So in other words, it's already a morning. So you see, the greatest sages who ever lived, they sat down for an entire night and they recounted all the different stories that they could in order to say over this mitzvah. Every little detail that you can say the night of the Seder about what happened in Egypt is another mitzvah. Who are we talking about here? Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon. 5 of the greatest chachamim, Shayu Mesubim Bnei Brak, they were in Bnei Brak, and the Mefarshim tell us that Bnei Brak, even at that time, was referring to a city that is in Gush Dan, which is in central Israel. Again, not in Yerushalayim. They were there and they were learning, and there was the night of the Seder, they were talking the entire night about the story of the Exodus from Egypt. The greatest chachamim were doing so. So the first thing that we have to understand is that it doesn't make a difference what you know, what you don't know. Anything that you can recount the night of the Seder is a tremendous, tremendous mitzvah. Any little detail about what happened when we were in Egypt is a huge mitzvah. And that's why I was telling you all that it's important to make sure that you come prepared, because even after the Seder, that night, it's a tremendous, tremendous mitzvah to do so. Now, I want to read to you the words of the Zohar HaKadosh. The Zohar brings down what exactly happens in Shamayim when a person goes ahead and recounts these words of what happened. So, says the Zohar the following. I'm reading it to you in the original Aramaic. Any person who says over the story of the Exodus from Egypt, that night of the Seder. Ubehahu sipura chadi bechedva. And that night, with the storytelling, he is rejoicing in happiness. Zamin ihu lemechade b'shchinta le'al madati. So that person is invited to rejoice with the divine presence in the world to come. The Holy One, blessed be He, is so happy with that story. Ubei shata, and at that moment, Kanish kuchabrichu the kol pamal Hakadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, gathers the entire heavenly accompaniment that He has, all of His angels. Ve'amar alone, He says to them, Zilu u'shema'u sipura de shabcha dili. Go and listen to the story of my praise. That my children are telling over and they're rejoicing in the fact that I saved them. At that point, all of the heavenly beings go and unite together with Hashem, with the Jewish people rather, and they listen to the story of praise of Hashem, that they're so happy and rejoicing with the fact that Hashem saved them. At that moment, those angels go to Hashem and they say, and they thank Hashem for all that He did for Am Yisrael. And they say, thank you, Hashem, for having such a wonderful nation on the earth. That they're so happy, they're rejoicing in the salvation of their master. At that moment, there's strength that's added to the heavenly forces in Shamayim, which is a tremendous deal. So you see what's going on in Shamayim when a person goes ahead and says over the story of what happened the night of Egypt. So we understand that it's a tremendous thing. Now, by the way, I would like to point out that everybody thinks, yeah, we know the story already, we know everything, but I want you to know that every year that I go through different mefarshim, I go through different, explanations about what's going on. I want you to know every year I learn something new. Every year. And you think you know everything, but little do you know there's so much that you have absolutely no idea about. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. And again, any kind of example like this that you say over the night of the Seder is another mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, which causes this heavenly celestial thing going on like we just described a minute ago, which is amazing. So first of all, I'll give you an example. Did you know one of the 10 plagues was the plague of Dever? Dever is pestilence, when animals drop dead randomly. The Egyptians' animals simply drop dead. So if you'll notice in the Pasuk, it says that Hashem announced that tomorrow this is going to happen. So the Mefarshim ask, why did Hashem announce that this is going to happen tomorrow? So the answer that the Meshech Chochmah gives, Rav Meir Simcha of Divinsky, says a beautiful answer. He says the answer is because this way, those that were aware that this is going to happen, everyone is aware, but those who were afraid for the lives of their animals had the opportunity to sell or to lend their animals to Jews who would not be smitten by this plague, and then when it's over, get it back. Okay, so it's an interesting thing. So Hashem announced when this is going to happen, so that those people that were afraid of the word of Hashem could actually save their livestock by handing it over to Jews. So it's in Jewish possession; it's not going to get hit, and then getting it back from the Jews after the plague took place. Very interesting thing. So now, why is that so important for us? The answer is because what happened when the Jews left Egypt? They went to all the Egyptians and asked them to, quote unquote, borrow their gold and silver. Now we know that they had to go inside into their homes when it was the plague of darkness. It wasn't dark for them, but for everybody else it was dark, and they were able to go and see where everyone has their gold and silver. They didn't take anything, but then they came back and asked, can I borrow your silver item over there, which I know is in your cabinet? Can I take your gold item over there? Now, being that at this point they had just had all their animals saved by the Jewish people who took them in order to protect them and gave them back, they couldn't stare them in the eye and say no. So all these Jewish people are left with a tremendous wealth because of that. Again, that's one example of something that I myself did not know until I prepared this class for this year. And Baruch Hashem, now we know it. So you have another chidush to say at the Seder. Every year you can learn more. I'll give you another one. These are all amazing chidushim. it says that there was a dispute for quite some time between Egypt and Ethiopia. At the time, Ethiopia had a border with Egypt. It went all the way there. Today, it's a little bit different, but at the time, Ethiopia had a border with Egypt, and there was a dispute over where is the border between Egypt and Ethiopia. Obviously, Egypt thought they had more territory. Ethiopia thought they had more territory. So what happened was that when this plague of Arbe took place, which is the plague of locusts, so it said, Hashem says, I'm sending Arbe, I'm sending the locusts within your borders, the Egyptian borders. So it says in your borders, but not the borders of Ethiopia. So therefore, when the locusts were wherever they went until, that was a sign that that's Egypt, and beyond that point is Ethiopia. So the Mefarshim asked an interesting question. This is actually from the Sefer Talei Orot on page Reish Samechet. If you want, you can look it up yourself. It's very interesting. He says the following idea: is there's a problem here, because why would you need that? In the plague of frogs, that already happened. The frogs came before. The frogs went all over the borders of Egypt. So the question was, why would you then need to have it again by the plague of locusts? So he explains very interesting. He says that the frogs, it's true, they went to the border of Egypt, and at that point, the Egyptians had planted trees to show where exactly the frogs are going until. Now, the problem was at a certain point, there was the plague of Barad, hail. The hail destroyed all the trees. So since the hail destroyed all the trees, so now they didn't know where the border was, and the dispute came up all over again. Until when? Until the locusts. So the locusts finally resettled that dispute all over again. Again, simple, chidush, factual, and it's the kind of thing that it's like, I never knew this. But if you research it, you look into it, you see them in Farashim, you see what they say, that little detail that you could share the night of the Seder, any of the details, is a tremendous, tremendous mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, telling over the story of the Exodus of Egypt. And the list goes on and on and on and on. There's so many midrashim that you could talk about. I'll just tell you one last one because we have a lot to do, but just one that we've spoken about in the past, the story of Rachel, the very sad story of this woman that, as you know, they used to make the men do female jobs and the females do men jobs. And they took this woman, Rachel, they made her a human cement truck. They made, as a cement truck is always rotating so that the cement doesn't stop and stand still so it shouldn't dry up. So they made this woman who was 9 months pregnant stand inside of this huge tub of cement and rotate her stick so that she keep on stirring it. And eventually her baby was about to come out, and she gave birth to the baby in the cement, who unfortunately died, at which point she screamed out to Hashem, and it says, Vatal Shavatam Elokim. At that point, Hashem heard their cries, and Hashem decided to redeem Am Yisrael. So again, that's a small story. It's a midrash. It's a teaching of Chazal, but it's a story that explains at what point Hashem decided that's it. Now it's time for them to be redeemed. Again, every little detail that you can prepare, that you can say over the night of the Seder, is another mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim. So that's something very important to bring down. Now, I want to share with you a chidush that Chacham Ovadia Yosef brings down about what it says about these great rabbis, that upon concluding their statement, these great rabbis were sitting in Bnei Brak, and they said, Kol hamarbe lesaper b'yetziat Mitzrayim, meshubach, that the more you tell over the story of the Exodus of Egypt on the night of the Seder, that person is meshubach. Meshubach means praiseworthy, right? Now, it's an interesting thing to note that says Chacham Ovadia, quoting the great Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Spector, Zecher Tzedek Livracha, he says, it doesn't say yeshubach. Yeshubach means he will be praised. But rather it says Harizeh Meshubach, which means he is praiseworthy. So, in other words, you would think that if you're talking about a person who is about to do something very, very good, but he has yet to do it, so this person will be praised for what he's doing. But it doesn't say that. It says he is praiseworthy. So this is a very interesting question. So Chacham Ovadia brings down that there are, different types of people out there. And he says, actually, Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Spector says this. He says the idea is some people, the way they view our holidays, which is a classic Jewish joke, they tried to kill us, we won, let's eat. That's basically what it is. They tried to kill us. They tried to get us to, uh, you know, uh, be slaves. We got freed. God saved it. Let's eat. Let's have a seder now. So that's one way of looking at it, which is true. We were physically enslaved. We were freed from slavery, and we have to thank Hashem for that. But the truth of the matter is that there's a much, much greater redemption from the servitude in Egypt, which is that it's not just the physical redemption, but it's the spiritual redemption. The fact that at this point we were made into a nation, we were given the man that Hashem gave us from Shamayim, food for 40 years. At this point, we received the Torah. We got 613 mitzvot. We became closer to Hashem than any other nation by doing all those mitzvot. There was so much going on a spiritual level, and there's so much to thank Hashem for. So a person that doesn't just say, okay, you know what, we're here to celebrate our freedom, and then that's it. Where's the food, right? But instead, he goes on and on and on. You see that this guy is a different quality Jew. He's a premium. He's a VIP Jew. He's a different guy. So it's not that he will be praised. It's that the fact that he's doing this and he's making an effort to say every story, and he's making an effort to keep the kids awake, and he's making an effort to teach his children about emunah, about faith in Hashem, and that there's nothing else besides Hashem. He's making all of an attempt to do whatever he can to teach this lesson to his family. This guy, you see, he's not an ordinary guy. He's a top quality. That guy is not an ordinary, right? An ordinary guy. This guy is premium, right? This guy is a high level, high caliber. So it's a sign of who he is, because the simple guy is going, okay, whatever, let's do it, let's finish it, and that's it. But this guy, this guy is a different league. Why? Because the fact that he's going on and on and on and on about it, again, he has to do it smart, right? He has to be wise. If you got Uncle so-and-so who's about to throw a fit, and you're about to, you have to do things with wisdom, right? It could be that you have time after the Seder to go on and on about it. So therefore, you have to do it wisely. But the point is the fact that, like, for that example, these tzaddikim sitting in Bnei Brak, if they were doing this, that's a sign that these people were incredible people who understood the importance of telling over the Yetziat Mitzrayim the night of the Seder. Now I want to share with you one more point about this story. This story, I saw this brought down from, again, in this beautiful Haggadah from Rabbi Bamberger. He brings down from Rabbi Yechiel Michal Epstein a very interesting point. He says this story apparently happened after Churban Habayit. Churban Habayit is the destruction of the Second Temple. Now, we all know the famous story about how Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues saw the destruction of the temple, and they saw the devastation and the millions of people who were killed, and they saw everything happen and unfold before their eyes. And while everybody was up on the mountain looking at this Rasha, wicked Roman guy plowing the area of the temple, and they were crying and sobbing because they lost everything, they lost their holy Yerushalayim. So Rabbi Akiva was laughing. Rabbi Akiva was laughing, and everyone said to Rabbi Akiva, "Why are you laughing?" And Rabbi Akiva said, "I'm laughing because I know that just like the prophecy that said that we're going to lose the temple came true, the prophecy that said that we're going to get it back and there's going to be the time of Mashiach Tzidkenu, that's also going to come true." And famously they said, "Akiva nichamtanu, Akiva nichamtanu, Akiva, you have comforted us, you have comforted us." So this is an interesting point, and I think this point that he's making is very clear from the fact that where were they? They were in Bnei Brak. This is my little add-on. Why were they in Bnei Brak, right? Bnei Brak is not Yerushalayim. As we know, on the festivals, on the 3 festivals, there's a mitzvah to go to Yerushalayim, especially for Pesach, because you have to bring a special sacrifice called the Korban Pesach. You got to eat it in the city of Yerushalayim. Why are they not there? Must be that they were not there because the temple had already been destroyed. So over here, he adds another very interesting element to this idea. Why are they all here by Rabbi Akiva? What's the idea over here? The answer is that these great Chachamim knew that Rabbi Akiva was the ultimate source of hope and optimism. If he's able to stand there and say that while they're watching the temple be destroyed, while they're watching everything go down, and this man is still able to see the positive and to see the good in what's going to come down the road many, many years later. Definitely, he probably knew it's not even happening in his lifetime, but he knew that ultimately it's going to happen, and he was able to find comfort in that. So at this point in time, these great Chachamim, even the greatest of Chachamim, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azar, Rabbi Tarfon, they all came to Rabbi Akiva to get that guidance and reassurance from him about the future. So first of all, you see from this story, you see another very important point. We see many points from the story as we've been saying, but another point that we see is that even the greatest tzaddikim could use some chizuk. They could use some encouragement and strengthening from a friend or a colleague. That's number one. Number two, from this beautiful point that he makes, you see that Yetziat Mitzrayim. So how does telling over the story of Egypt help them in their time when the Romans just destroyed their temple? The answer is because the idea, again, is very simple. What we learn from Yetziat Mitzrayim, from the exodus of Egypt, is the fact that there's a seder, there is an order to everything. There is a method to the madness. There's a reason for everything that's happening. And everything is under divine control. And there's nothing that is without the stamp of Hashem. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants it to happen, that's what's going to happen. If Hashem does not want it to happen, it's not going to happen. And he comforted them and explained to them that what does Hashem say will happen? Eventually there will be a Bet HaMikdash. And again, there will be another temple. There will be a Mashiach that comes and redeems us. And just like all these other prophecies came true, this one will also come true. So he gave them the chizuk. And he reminded them, just like back then we started off the night as slaves, tonight we also continue as we became free. Tonight we also are eventually we're going to be free as well. Unfortunately, we're suffering a crazy situation now, but we're going to be free too. That's what the chizuk, that the strengthening that he gave them, that's what he was able to remind them. And so too, Rabotai, for us as well, the night of the Seder should be a night of chizuk, a night of strengthening ourselves as well. Because right now, as you know, unfortunately throughout the world, we are experiencing a very difficult time, a tremendous rise in anti-Semitism, tremendous rise in all kinds of things that are going on throughout the world against the Jewish people, unfortunately, in a very revealed and very open way, more so than we've seen in previous decades. And we have to remind ourselves that just like that very night, they started off as literally slaves. By the end of the night, they were freed. So too, in our situation, we have hostages that are taken. By the end of that night, they could be free too. By the end of that night, we could also have an elimination of all terrorists, Hamas, Hezbollah, all Imach Shemam Zichram. We can get rid of all of them. We can get rid of all of them. If Kadosh Baruch Hu wants it to happen, then there's nothing that can stop Hashem. And that's the most important thing we have to remind ourselves, that Hashem is always with us. It doesn't make a difference who it is, Houthis, this, nothing matters. All that matters is one thing: what does Hashem want? And it's our job to remind ourselves that by us connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, doing the mitzvah of Hashem, we can arouse, just like back then, we can arouse a divine desire and love for the Jewish people by doing all that Hashem wants us to do. And that could be a tremendous source of chizuk for all of us. To remember that there's a method to the madness, there's a reason for everything. We might not know why, might not understand it, but by us coming closer to Hashem, we could get the exact same thing that happened back then, from slavery instantly to freedom. So we can also have that. There's no reason, nothing is stopping Hashem from doing that for us as well. It could happen in the blink of an eye. Yeshuat Hashem, the salvation of Hashem, keheref ayin, is like the blink of an eye, Chazal have taught us. And by the way, this is why we mention every single morning in our tefillot, every day, Ezrat Avotenu Atahu Meolam, Magenu Moshiach Lehem V'Nivnei Bechem B'chol Dor. You were the one that helped our forefathers in every single generation. We say this every morning. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you are the ones that you took our forefathers out of Egypt. You helped them to destroy that country, to have all their firstborns killed. Why do we remind ourselves this every single day? Because this is our source of hope. The fact that what happened in Egypt happened is a reminder to us that there's nothing that Hashem cannot do. Nothing. And that's the mitzvah that we have this night, to make our children aware of this, to arouse what they already have internally as a Jewish soul, which is already attached to Hashem, to bring it to the forefront and say, this is what we have to remember, that this is very much applicable to us, if not more so today than even back then. That's very important. Another very important point that I wanted to share with you is what we see in the Haggadah, that it starts off talking about our history. And it starts off saying מתחילה עובדי עבודה זרה היו אבותינו. Initially, our forefathers were idol worshippers. And it starts mentioning names. It says that there was Terach, the father of Avraham Avinu. Abraham, our forefather, had a father named Terach. As you know, famously, Terach had an idol store. They had idols, and they sold them. And Terach was also the father of Nachor, the brother of Avraham. Nachor was a heavy-duty idol worshiper, and they were heavily involved in these things. And the question, obviously, is why are we talking about something that is so not a compliment to us, the night of the Seder? This is something which is kind of hanging up our dirty laundry in public. Why do we have to talk about this right now? Why do we have to mention? It's, by the way, it's forbidden al pi halacha. You're not allowed to you're not allowed to remind somebody of his bad deeds that he has done in the past. Now, thank God he's not doing that anymore. You can't go over to somebody and say, hey, you remember you used to go and order a basket of shrimp, at whatever, you remember you used to go get the special at Red Lobster and eating shrimp? You can't say that to somebody because that's hurting him. It's reminding him of his past things that he did wrong. So it's a sort to do that. So why all of a sudden are we talking about who our forefathers were and the bad things that they did? Right? We know Avraham was different, so let's just leave it at that, right? So the answer is no. There's a special idea that the Haggadah is trying to convey to us. And this, again, is super applicable to us nowadays as well, just like it was way back when. And that is the following. Our forefathers, Avraham Avinu, and Yitzchak, his son, and Yaakov, his son, our forefathers never just went with the flow. They are not people that just go with the current. They were people who stood up for what was right, for what Hashem wanted. And they understood that that comes at a price, at a heavy price. It means you're isolated from your family. It means that the whole world looks at you like you're a weirdo. It means that everybody thinks that something is wrong with you. And you are the only person who knows that this is absolutely wrong what they're doing and I'm totally right. It might even mean that they put the person to death. Avraham Avinu, seemingly, he was at odds with his own father, with his own brother. And at a certain point, we know that Nimrod threw him into a fiery furnace. Nimrod was saying that he's God, that he's the king. Everyone has to bow down to him. Terach was a servant of Nimrod. He was a second to the king. He was somebody that was very powerful because he was close to Nimrod. And the second in command has a son that's rebelling against the king. So Nimrod said, listen, you know what has to happen. And Terach said, I guess so. Unfortunately, they took Avraham, the man's own son, they threw him into the fire. Now Avraham says, okay, I don't care. I'm not interested. I do what's right. I do what's right in the eyes of God, even if that means death. So Avraham was thrown into the fire. Now Hashem made a miracle, and Hashem saved Avraham. And Avraham was able to start his family and start the Jewish people. But you see what the idea of being a Jew means from this. That's the idea. That a Jew is somebody that's supposed to be like Avraham Avinu. The entire world could be saying something, and it means absolutely nothing to us. Because if we go with what Hashem wants, that's all we care about. That's all that matters. What does Hashem want? What is right in the eyes of Borei Olam? That's all that matters to us. Nothing else matters. You see, Rabotai, unfortunately, people have a tendency to go with the flow. I saw this very interesting experiment. In the 1950s, there was something called the Ash Conformity Experiments. It was by Professor Solomon Ash. Very interesting discussion. This was in Swarthmore College. And he did experiments. He took cards that he wrote. He had a card with one line on it, and he had a card with 3 other lines on it. One of the lines of the 3 was equal to the line on the other card. Its height was the same. And there was another line that was smaller, another line that was longer, taller. And he had people come in. He had actors pretending to see something that was not true. And his experiment was on, out of, let's say, 12 people, 11 were actors, and the 12th one was not. And they wanted to see, what will that 12th guy say? And they did this experiment in like 12 different ways. And he came out with a very staggering figures. 74% of all of his participants, they at least gave one wrong answer throughout the 12 different trials that they had. People are influenced by what other people say. That's just the fact of the matter. That's how people live. We're influenced by what's around us. It has an effect on us. And it changes what we think. Literally changes what we think. You could see one thing and you see with your eyes and you understand that that's the right thing, but everybody's saying something else. It must be that I'm wrong. And the quote that he had was is that intelligent, well-meaning young people are willing to call white black is a matter of concern. We see this with our own eyes today. The people are saying that a boy is a girl and a girl is a boy. I mean, these are basic things that all of a sudden is like a confusion out there in the world. It's very, very simple. It's not like you invented the wheel here. There are two genders. It's not a big deal. So all of a sudden, things are different. Over here, Rabotai, we have the message of Avraham Avinu. The message of Avraham Avinu went to his father's store, and he broke all those idols, and he said, none of this stuff is real. It's all fake. It's all phony baloney. And he was standing for what was right. That's the bottom line. He stood for what was right. And what is right? What is considered to be right? What is right is what is correct in the eyes of Hashem. That's our measuring stick. So Rabotai, the Haggadah is telling us over here, yes, remember, who was your father? Nachor was your great uncle. And his father, which is your great grandfather, Terach, they worshipped idols and they did all these bad things. And who was the one that stopped it? Who said, this is enough? Avraham Avinu got up and said, no more. This is crazy. I have to do what's right in the eyes of Hashem. So the message that we tell our children tonight, that night of the Seder, is this is who we are. We are the people that do what's right in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's how we know what is right, what is wrong. Whatever Hashem says is right, is right. Whatever Hashem says is wrong, and that's the end of it. There's no two ways about it. And therefore, when we see that the whole world is going in a certain direction, we stand tall and proud, and we're not apologetic, and we say, this is wrong. We don't bow down to anything else besides HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We don't back off. We stand strong and firm about what we believe in. And that's a very important message. The Haggadah, the night of the Seder, the Baal Haggadah wants us to teach our children. Make sure to remind them where we come from. It's not easy. It's not an easy job to be a Jew. But that's our job. That's our mission, to be a light unto the nations, not to be affected by them, the opposite, to shed our light onto them. And to make sure that it's clear what it is that is correct and what is incorrect in the eyes of Hashem. Rabotai, we're going to have to stop over here tonight. Thanks for joining me. We're going to stop. Thank you so much, guys. I wish you all a Chag Kasher V'Sameach and only good news. B'Hatzlacha.